Hey all, it's Paul from Drums and Rums with the Backbeats Beats the Spirit. This episode is sponsored by Club Tiki. Visit them at clubtikico.com to order rum-based cocktails in a can. Use promo code Drums and Rums to receive a discount and free shipping when you order 2 4-packs or more. They can the tropics so you don't have to.
Want to learn more about rum or expand your rum knowledge? Then become a Rumlier. The Royal Rum Society has Rumlier certification programs for all levels, from an enthusiast who wants to learn more about rum all the way to Master Rumlier certification, the highest degree of rum knowledge, discernment, and elucidation. Visit rumlier.com, that's RUMMELIER.com. Use promo code DRUMS2022 and receive 15% discount off your enrollment.
Hey all, it's Paul from Drums and Rums with the Backbeats Meets the Spirits, episode 114. And this is a solo podcast episode. So you just got me today. And, it's a little bit of a preview, a little bit kind of getting excited here for an upcoming show that's been actually 2 years in the making. And this is the first time I'm actually going to be seeing this performer. And it's actually once after the show's over, I have kind of cool to say that I've seen 2/4 of the Beatles. Unfortunately, not together, right? Those who are still surviving, still living, I guess. And this upcoming show was originally supposed to be from 2020. And as most people know, what happened in 2020, then it was 2021, rescheduled again, and now 2022. And this show was supposed to take place in June of 2022. Well, 2 of the members got COVID, and now it's been postponed to September. Well, we're taping this episode on September 12th, and it's actually, the show will be taking place on Saturday, September 17th, down at the Hard Rock Casino in Hollywood, Florida. We're really looking forward to seeing this performer and his all-star band. So let's just kind of get right into it. So you probably already may know who I'm talking about, and he goes by, most people know who he is by his name that he goes by now, Ringo Starr. But as he was born with the name Richard Stark, and he was born, so we're just going to refer to him by Ringo for the most of the story here. This is easier, again, because that's how I've always known him as. And so Ringo was born July 7th, 1940 in Liverpool, England. Now he's the oldest Beatle, and he was 3 months older than John. And he was born in, as I mentioned, in Liverpool. His father was a dock worker, his mother was a baker, so pretty modest, probably middle class family. Growing up in Liverpool, in the early 40s. See, just getting, still thinking about history here, where just before, World War II starts happening, kind of set that stage as how far back we think about this. Now, Ringo's parents met in this bakery and later married. And so when little Richie was just 3 years old, his parents unfortunately broke up. Ringo's mom later married Harry Graves, who Ringo called his stepladder. Now, Ringo was a happy child despite the various hospital visits that filled much of his life. That's pretty much, if you know Ringo, he's very laid back. He's very peace and love. That's his slogan. That's his catchphrase, whatever you want to call it. But, it doesn't surprise me that he's a very, very kind-hearted person, or very happy. So, unfortunately, he entered the hospital for the first time at 6 years of age for a bout of appendicitis. And Ringo became quite bored, like any kid, a little child that's bored. Again, this before TVs were probably in hospitals at all. And you're talking about in the 40s, right? 46 a time frame, right? And so even though he was a bit lonely, his parents brought him 2 toys to keep him entertained. One was a red bus, and the other was a small drum. Ringo's first drum. Now, that's a heck of a place to be. The first drum is in the hospital, right? But so young Ringo kept himself well occupied with the drum, but upon noticing there was a lonely boy in the bed next to him, and Ringo decided to give up pretty red bus. And as little Ringo leaned out of the bed to give his bus to the other boy, he fell, hitting his head and knocking himself into a coma. Talk about luck. So Ringo remained in the hospital for around another year, putting him behind in his education. So you've probably heard a lot of stories about how he's not as smart or educated or, compared to John and Paul, being around those two guys. But you can understand, some of his, not that he was dumb by any means, but just, again, he was as very behind in his school. So once he finally got out of hospital, as I mentioned, he was seriously behind his schoolwork. He couldn't read very well and was put in a class with kids much younger than him. Ringo became quite unhappy with his schooling situation. It could be understood, right? So you're in a class, you're older, the older kid is almost like, what's that Adam Sandler movie, Billy Madison, right? But much older than fellow students in your classroom. And at 13, Ringo caught a cold, which turned into pleurisy, putting him back into the hospital and further behind in his schoolwork. So you want to talk about just, unfortunate health, luck, and that just gotta really suck, just being behind in that growing up. And Ringo also then started smoking around this time, and probably for something to do, right? And again, boredom sets in, and you keep idle hand, right? By 15, he could barely read and write. Like the other three Beatles, Ringo became interested with Liverpool music known as skiffle. Ringo started his own group called the Eddie Clayton Skiffle Group in 1957. And in 1959, Ringo moved on to the Raving Texans, a quartet led by Rory Storm. Ringo became quite a good drummer with the added performance practice and even taking advantage of solos called Star Time. Ringo got his nickname here because of the numerous rings he wore on his pinky and ring fingers. The name Starr was chosen by dropping the key from his last name. Thus, this gave him the catchy title we know him by today, Ringo Starr. Now, Rory changed the name of the band to the Hurricanes, and they became a big success in Liverpool and Germany. It was in Hamburg in 1960 when Ringo first met his fellow Beatle. At the time, Rory Storm's band was much more popular than the Beatles. Now, Beatles with an A, right? That's the difference in the name, as some people may have thought originally. Nevertheless, the interest in Ringo Starr led to his joining the band in 1962. Rory Storm was quite unhappy to lose such a great drummer, and Pete Best, the Beatles' original drummer, was less happy to be replaced. Many Pete Best fans rejected Ringo, holding vigils outside of Pete's house and rioting at the Cavern Club. The shout of Pete Best forever, Ringo never was prevalent. Still, there was a wonderful connection between Ringo's drumming style and the music of the Beatles. Ringo's fun-loving attitude was appealing, giving the rest of the Beatles a head start on their special humor. And as you know the Beatles, they had such an interesting kind of humor, British humor, right? And cheekiness. Ringo's health would continue to cause problems again later. In 1964, Ringo missed 3/4 of the tour in Scandinavia, Holland, the Far East, and Australia to have his tonsils out. Once this was resolved, the Beatles were underway. Ringo contributed many interesting quotes to the Beatles' repertoire, some of which became song titles. 8 Days a Week was written after one of Ringo's expressions. The Beatles' first movie, originally called Beatlemania, was instead called A Hard Day's Night after something Ringo said one evening after a particularly grueling session. Because he seemed content to sit at the back, Ringo was sometimes considered to be the least important Beatle, as I mentioned, right? And unfortunately, a lot of drummers get that, right? We sit in the back behind everyone who's up front and, pay no attention to the guy or girl in the back there sitting on the drum throne, right? Well, that's always seems to be the story of us drummers' lives. Right? We're all the way in the back, blocked by the guitarist and the singer. But, he was not one of the main writers, nor was he a strong vocalist. Ringo was only given one song per album, but in my opinion, Ringo used his valuable space well. Ringo became an integral part of the Beatles. Not only did he inventive drumming help provide the Beatles' distinctive sound, but he fulfilled other real needs. Ringo was the most down-to-earth member of the Fab Four. Ringo was the friendly Beatle. He received more fan mail than any of the others. They became the mediator in many of the later arguments of the band. The Beatles formed this sensitivity, his sense of humor, and his peace and love way of dealing with the world. His modesty and kind heart was important to the Beatles as John and Paul's musical talent. Ringo always seemed a bit overwhelmed by the success of the Beatles, as if he was pleasantly surprised by what was happening. Ringo really looked up to John, Paul, and George as three brothers and continues to love them each as such day. He gave himself to him the best he could do with love and without ego. Ringo had his most important dreams come true with the Beatles. The only dream Ringo never fulfilled was to sit in the audience at a Beatles concert. Ringo has been married twice, first to his longtime girlfriend Maureen Cox, which he met Maureen in the Cavern Club when he was still in Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. Ringo and Maureen were married at the Caxton Hall in Westminster in February 1965. They had 3 children, Zach, Jason, and Lee. And unfortunately, Ringo and Maureen were divorced in 1975, and sadly, Maureen died in 1994 leukemia, despite a bone marrow transplant from her son Zach. And Ringo married Barbara Bach, whom he met on the set of Caveman movie in 1983, and they're still happening. So you may have heard of Zach's name come up for Zach Ringo or Zach Starr, and he has performed with other groups. He's performed even with the Who, and so definitely you've probably heard of him. So Ringo not only had a successful musical career with the Beatles, but he also had solo efforts with his all-star band. Ringo has had many great solo hits such as Photograph, Back Off Boogaloo, You're 16, and It Don't Come Easy. Ringo's worked with many famous and wonderful artists such as Elton John, Harry Nilsson, Peter Frampton, Steven Tyler, Petty, and even Ozzy Osbourne. And Ringo remains one of the most famous drummers, and it's not just because he was in the Beatles. His abilities behind the kit were first rate, so much so that he was one of the only drummers George Harrison depended on during his solo. Starr's drumming skills are even more impressive when you learn one fact about him: the kit he's used for decades. Ringo was one of the only drummers, as I mentioned, that George trusted to contribute to his solo album. It's hard to listen to Beatles songs like Come Together or Tomorrow Never Dies, not be astounded by Ringo's drumming. In both cases, the beats make the songs instantly recognizable. Phil Collins, other famed drummer from his solo career as well as Genesis, also known for his top shelf skills on the Skins, praised Ringo's drumming. Collins, he was an extra on Hard Day's Night. That was a movie that was made back in the 60s by the Beatles. Kind of fun, cheeky movie about them playing the music and all the craze that was going on at the time. And when he was there during the filming, Phil Collins knew he was filming a Beatles movie because he recognized Ringo's. Now, for those of you that are drummers, you know who the Beatles are and so forth, and know who Ringo is. You know how iconic that Ludwig drum kit is that Ringo played. Right. So you see it, you just know instantly that's Ringo kit. So you can definitely understand. I can totally get to see that with Phil Collins thinking about that this was, whose drum kit that actually. An urban legend held that John Lennon claimed Ringo wasn't even the best drummer in the Beatles, and that wasn't true. Come on, now, again, that was just John being John, right? And John once said that, while not a technical wizard, Ringo was talented and a damn fine drummer. And that praise gave for Ringo's drumming skills overshadows one fact that makes him, his timekeeping, even more impressive. Now, the way Ringo played the drums, right? So, stringed instruments come in right and left-handed versions. However, a drummer can rearrange their drum kit to suit the dominant hand. So you see lefty drummers, you see righty drummers. It's not like you have a left-handed snare or a right-handed, crash cymbal or anything like that, right? But what's really interesting is that Ringo's drumming skills are more impressive when you consider he's a lefty who's played with a right-handed setup for decades. So this was a quote from Ringo from a Conan O'Brien interview. Ringo said, "I was born left-handed, and my grandmother thought that it was not a good sign, and so she turned me right-handed. So I write right-handed, but anything else I do is left-handed, golf and whatever. So I have a right-handed kit, but I lead with my left. It makes it weird because I need time to do fill. So a drummer can roll from the snare to the tom-tom to the floor, where I can't do it because I've got to come under my right hand all the time. I can go this way to my left really good." And then so that's Ringo's drumming technique. Now again, I'll try to demonstrate here if you're watching the video, talking about what he's talking about for those the non-drummers, right? So he's trying to roll. So I'm a right-handed drummer, and when you roll, so my right hand's keeping it on the hi-hat, right? My left hand's on the snare. So when a right-handed drummer goes to do a drum roll, drum fill, he goes up on the tom, the high tom, right hand first, left hand next on the tom, right hand next on the next tom, left hand, and so on and so forth. But what he's saying is he's got to move his left hand underneath. So the left hand that's on the snare, that's underneath his right hand that's on the hi-hat. So now he's got to come up, move his right hand out of the way, left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand. So it's interesting. So if you ever watch him perform, you'll see how the movement of his hands, he's a dominant lefty when he does his drum fill. So that's kind of really impressive, that just figuring out. But again, that creates his unique style, right? So the question always is, why didn't he ever just adjust his kit, right? Especially after the Beatles made it big. But it might have been because of after years of playing the drums with a righty setup, he became proficient at leading with his left hand despite the challenge. The backhand playing also gave him a signature sound. He would lead with his left, which most right-handed drummers, when you go around the drums, you lead with your right hand. And this is a quote from Chad Smith of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, as he said during one of the promo video for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And there is a different sound to it and a different feel. All right, so again, Ringo had his own totally unique style. And that's different sound and feel and contribute to it again as signature drum riffs, such as a mid-early solo in the Abbey Road song, The End. So a lot of talk about when, with the two surviving members of the Beatles, are Paul and Ringo still friends, right? So the Beatles split on less than perfect terms after nearly a decade of making music and history together. Their time together as a quartet had ran its course, but the shared history ensured each of them would remain close with each other. That includes Ringo and Paul. Now, Paul once threw Ringo out of his house when the drummer tried to deliver a letter from the other three Beatles, but that moment of conflict didn't sour their relationship. The band broke up, and Paul said his drummer was a pro for never being late to rehearsal. They've made up time to meet up socially, play together over the years, just as George had Ringo lend his stick work to do solo work. So did Paul. Ringo lent his drumming skills to several of Paul's solo albums, and Paul and Ringo FaceTime each other on a regular when they're not playing together or meeting. But whether the Beatles solo or with his all-star band, Ringo's drumming skills have never failed to impress. Now, something with the recent passing here, as I mentioned, this is being taped on September 12th, 2022. And a couple of little footnotes here along the timeline, Ringo's timeline. And this is kind of fitting, obviously, with the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. In October 26, 1965, Queen Elizabeth II awards the Beatles the most excellent order of the British Empire medals at Buckingham Palace. 65. And then in December of 2017, Ringo is awarded a knighthood by the Queen of England at her 2018 New Year's Eve honors. Ringo is the second member of the Beatles to be knighted, 21 years after Paul McCartney. Now, Ringo is also been recognized as the most richest drummer, wealthiest drummer in the world at the moment, over Phil Collins and any other Dave Grohl. I guess even can be considered. He plays everything, but Ringo is actually one of those. So, again, kind of really neat. Looking forward to it. The show here, as I said, it's a little primer for this coming weekend. Looking really excited to see in the show here, and looking forward to the All-Star Band, which is these guys in the All-Star Band are no slouches, and they're big names in their own right as well. Which include in the All-Star Band includes Steve Lukather from Toto, Colin Hay of Men at Work, Warren Ham, saxophonist from bands like Kansas, Hamish Stewart, who is in the Average White Band, and Greg Bissonette, drummer for David Lee Roth and numerous other bands, and lastly Edgar Winter of Edgar Winter Group. So again, look forward to this. Should be a really fun show. They all are playing mostly cover songs here. Songs of each of them, their own bands or that they wrote. So it's going to be a nice mix of different music other than just Beatles or Ringo's music. And should be a really fun evening there. So again, this was originally supposed to be in June, and it was supposed to be for our anniversary, but it got rescheduled. And then to the heart of hurricane season, which I'm, knock on wood, the moment surprised that this actually still is taking place, or we didn't have a storm just yet. But anyway, so hopefully you enjoyed this little, look into who Ringo Starr is. As you mentioned, hopefully you got a chance to watch the documentary that came out there, Get Back, that just released. I think they've got all nominations for awards and so forth. This is brilliant. I know it's a long documentary, but it really gives a glimpse into what life was like as around the Beatles, recording in the studio, just them just kind of riffing on each other and just being really, really close, right? They're really tight. So look forward to seeing a show here. Like I said, 2/4 of the Beatles that'll be recognized. Obviously, can't get the other two anymore. But hopefully, like I said, you enjoy this episode where it's a little solo one of me just talking about Ringo Starr in preparation for the upcoming show here on Saturday, September 17th. So stay tuned to the next episode after this, because we'll be doing a review of the show, and I'll tell you what I think about it and kind of give a little bit of a backstory, and we'll post all sorts of stuff on social media. So don't forget to check out all of the things that we got going on here. Social media, the Instagram page, posting a lot of there, growing out the YouTube channel. So don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Got a lot of great episodes coming up there, as well as on Sunday and the 18th, we'll be having Manis Etine video premiere of his podcast. So hopefully you join us there. He'll be live in the chat to hang out with Manis and I, and we'll answer any questions and learn about some of his music and him. And if those who don't know, I interviewed him on the last episode, and he is the drummer for Michael Fronte and Speed. So again, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe. Check out Jams and Cocktails, Jams and Coffee, our fellow partner on our podcast network. Brad and I are doing our podcast, and we're working together in a part of our network and growing that out. So just stay tuned. Just follow whatever you can, because again, if you like what we're doing here, then we're looking forward to doing a lot more too. So this is Paul. I'll see y'all. Peace and love. Peace and love. Where the backbeats meet the spirits. Thanks all.
If you like what we're doing here at Drums and Rums, we have a Patreon link to help with setting up interviews and creating content that you find entertaining and interesting. Also, if you'd like to sponsor, advertise on the podcast, or if you want to come on as a guest to promote something related to the show, email me at info@drumsandrums.com. Lastly, I want to thank Brad Brock tune titled Once Upon a Bottle of Rum, and check out his podcast, Jams and Cocktails. Thanks again for listening.
where the backbeats meet the spirits.